Welcome back to the show, everyone. On the video chat, we have Babe West. See their pertinent information right there along the bottom. The Babe West on Twitter. Babe, welcome to the show and thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm out in Vegas this week for my first content house that I'm shooting myself. So it's
Oh, that's
been
cool.
good so far.
Awesome. So, speaking of content, that's where we want to start. The adult content, the adult world. What made you want to get into that world in the first place?
Well, I've been on stage for most of my life, whether it was, up front on theater, in productions, or in the church. So I've always been a little bit of an attention person. And then as far as adult content in general, I've been in the fetish community as a model for over a decade. And a sex worker in various aspects, from dancing to full service, and porn was just the logical way to go. I had the revelation moment when I was at work for this company, in the IT server room. And I was like, what if I just didn't? What if I just set up my phone over here and instead of fixing the shit I gotta fix, I make a mess in the server room? It was an impulse, and I'm like, well, I could do that because I'm the only one here right now. So I just like cracked open the door, sat my phone there so people could kind of see, and then I made a mess in the server room and posted that up online somewhere, and it went really crazy. People loved it, and I was like, okay, yeah, I like that too. And so here we are.
You mentioned being a fetish model. I've had a lot of fetish models, cam models on the show over the years, and I've learned so much about what's out there that I would never have learned before. I imagine you get a lot of requests and stuff. Excuse me. What's some of the crazier things that people have requested from you?
If you would have asked me like 10 years ago what was crazy, I would have been like, oh, well, people really like taking pictures of my knees, my my toes, those kinds of things.
Not her knees.
Balloon.
That's a new one.
Oh, I love my knee people. And I really love my armpit people.
Mm.
Uh, I really do. I used to, when I was in the clubs, they would come in and they would like pay you money to just like sniff your armpits or lick them, and I'm all about that. I'm like, yes, give me the weird requests. But as far as like what I would consider weird these days, I get a lot of extreme requests that I don't do. But the craziest ones I think are like the balloon poppers, and not just the ones where you sit on the balloon and it pops and you're like, but like the big inflatables and all the crazy things you can do with that stuff. And I'm a sploosh girl. Like I travel around the country doing birthday cake dances where you can have your cake and eat it too, preferably off of my ass when I'm right in front of your face. But so I love wet and messy. And to me, I wouldn't think that that's really weird, but I've been asked to put a lot of things in my body and do like, will you do this? And I'm like, I don't do that. So
Yeah, what kind of stuff is like? I mean, like, what's kind of like? I guess you get a lot of disgusting stuff. Like, what's some of the stuff that's like off limits?
um well, I won't say anything's necessarily off limits because I don't yuck anybody's yums. But things that I haven't journeyed into is like as simple as farting, right? Like I get a lot of requests for like farts, and one of my great friends, that's what she makes most of her money off of is fart content, and I don't do that. I mean, I do. Everybody does, right? But I don't do that. So that's definitely one of those things I don't do. And then I do have like some waterworks content, piss play, whatever, but it's very selective and very specific. So I don't just do like piss play and all that. And then like people want to like see like extreme fisting, like anal fisting. And I'm like, I'll stick things up my butt, but I won't say I will never do it,
Mm.
but probably not. And so like anything in that, I don't like shit. I'm not a nurse because I didn't want to clean up puke and shit. And And so, and that was actually one of the things that I thought I would never do. Like, I would never have a blowjob scene where like I vomit on the dude. And lo and behold, here we are all these years later. And I have a couple of those, and they were specific things, and it
Mm.
wasn't my cup of tea, but it definitely was. It was worth it. So I'll never say never, but for right now, those are the things that are off limits.
Your adult content now, what you're up to now, where can people find that and what can they expect from that?
Oh, and so you can hit up thebabewest.com for all my links. And then my Twitter, my OnlyFans, which is currently free, has a lot more content available. With that, what I am up to, I'm actually on site for my first content house, like I said earlier,
Mm.
for my media company, Westward Ho. And I go to all these fantastic places, but a lot of the content I make is, to me, very generic, and I would call them clips. They're not really like full on productions, and we're trying to make a lot, the porn I want to see in the world. So we got girl, we have all across the gender spectrum. I'm an attention whore. I'm just like a horny little bitch. And so I like all people. If you're cute, I like you, and we can make good stuff together, then yeah, let's fuck. Um, One of my biggest series right now that I've been building is my random acts of blowjobs. And people are like, how do you do that randomly? And if you're in the industry, you got to get consent, you got to get all the forms. So I have somebody who meets with everybody, handles all the documentation, make sure they're tested, all that stuff, safety first.
Yeah.
And then I did a blow bang recently where I had just met these guys in the elevator. And that, I mean, they were all screened, of course, but the time we met, like, that's as random as you're going to get in these scenarios. And yeah, I blew three guys I didn't even fucking know. It was their first time meeting me, and it was great. And that one's kind of blown up on Reddit. People love that stuff, like I blow my Uber driver kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I have a friend who sets all that up for me, and it is the first time we are meeting in real life. So and then I love outdoors, public, anything that's really fun, sexy, and a little risque. Um, that's what you can expect from me.
Awesome. Now, in our correspondence back and forth about the show and being on the show, you mentioned psychedelics. And for somebody like me who's a novice and really hasn't tried psychedelics, I don't even know if the stuff I tried would fall into that category. But as far as a novice like myself or someone else, what would you tell them about like the therapeutic use of psychedelics?
Well, psychedelics is such a wide range of drugs that can be used medicinally outside of a party environment. And what I would say is there's a lot of them that, especially with microdosing and what we know now, and we have like profiles of like mushrooms. We know what the highs are going to be like with LSD, and other things like DMT. I would just say that for me, it was a radical step in changing behaviors and coming to terms with things about myself that were not healthy. I was using drugs because of trauma, but to kind of escape. But the more I learned, and especially after like I came across Alan Watts, the McKenna brothers, and all that, the more I realized that you can really connect with your human, your person, and I'm a big safety first person, harm reduction. So definitely research your things because some things are very thermogenic, can heat you up from the inside. You don't want to damage your organs. But there's a lot of promising things on the horizon. In Oregon, we're using psychedelics and therapeutic circumstances where people are microdosing and working through a life of trauma. And if you've lived long on this earth, you definitely have some. And, it gets a bad rap because of times like King Kesey, Tim Leary, all that stuff. And then later, a big war on drugs in general.
Right.
I would tell you that every mammal on Earth gets high. whether they're just finding drunken fruit, little kids spinning around in circles. That's the first feeling of high. Running. I used to run marathons and halves. You're definitely high. You get to like mile 10, you're high. You got those endorphins. And maybe a little bit crazy. But the biggest feeling I've always had is reconnecting with myself and really being able to see myself from beside myself and not judgmental, and accepting that I'm human, that things happen, that, some things are my fault, the situations I walk myself into. But the reason I react these ways, it just takes a little bit of that weight off. One of the ones I'm really excited, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a psychedelic, but it's definitely in that psychoactive house, is ketamine. And we're doing a lot more research and using it now in therapeutic purposes again in Oregon, since we decrimmed. And in the medicinal environment, it's really helping people who are like severely depressive. And I've been using marijuana, growing marijuana, back in California for over almost shit. It's been a minute. It's been a decade, y'all. I'm getting there. And I remember like we'd have these talks with Normal, and we'd have all these advocates at the farmers market in Santa Cruz, or all over the Bay Area. We'd have these festivals, and now it's part of everyday culture, at least for some of us. And even I didn't know that Washington, D.C. had decriminalized mushrooms. So I walked into a head shop and I bought mushrooms, and like I was like, oh my God, y'all. So people are like, oh, well, that will never happen. I wouldn't say that. I think as part of this world, like we have been seeking ways to elevate ourselves and to cope with living. And I think that like people don't think twice about alcohol unless alcohol is an issue in their family or they've been impacted by it. It's always in a negative aspect. There's so many other ways that you can get high or feel different than just here, that benefit you. And like I said, I don't knock anybody's yums, but I'll definitely talk about trips. And I'm a big believer in set and setting. That's the other thing. If you're experimenting, research, there's so many great resources out there. And the biggest thing is like, know what you're doing and be smart about it. Like I have friends that we were psychedelic warriors in the day. Like I would never take 7 grams to my head, or, like not anymore. And a good example is white penis or albino penis envies. These mushrooms, man, they'll get you. Got these like artisanal chocolates in California, and ate one. It was supposed to be like a gram. I was like, oh yeah, I got this. I wanted off that ride. So quick. I was like, oh, I felt like a first timer smoking. Like, what? What's going on? What did I do? So,
Yeah, from everything I've heard of people who use psychedelics, it's definitely they have life-changing experiences, and more so than I guess than other substances or whatnot. But it's something I've wanted to try. Like I don't know where salvia falls in to that category, but I did it once on the show and I hated it, and I've kind of avoided things like that ever since. All really give me a headache besides like the initial
yeah.
weirdness that came with it. It was I've just been one of those stick to weed kind of guys, which is you know, you say as you can
I
see, it's my whole gimmick.
Yeah, no, I love marijuana and I think it's great. And I remember when medical marijuana was first coming out, how uh, these higher strains and these like DJ Shorts was coming out with like really great stuff out of Cali, and they would hit you. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the craziest high I've ever had. And I used to live in Texas before Cali. So I was having like perfume weed, brick weed, like awful shit. I get to California and I'm like, oh, buddy. So I do think that anything that's psychotropic and can really alter your state of mind and elevate you is great. But also, I have friends who can't smoke weed because they won't do anything all day, and they know that about themselves. And
Yeah.
you can say it's strain specific, but not everything works for everyone.
Mhm.
Salvia is not my thing. I've had a good experience, but it wasn't worth it for
Yeah.
me. DMT though, that was. that was something else. And people are like, well, aren't you worried about blah 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 blah, like later on having flashbacks? And I I've done enough acid. I probably should have had some, and I haven't. Most of my trips have always been good too.
Mm.
Because again, I'm a big believer in set and setting. I really came into that whole realm through Terrence McKenna and the McKenna brothers and what they were doing out there with mycology and researching, the stoned ape theory and all that. And so, but when you say life changing, the one thing I definitely know is I've watched people who are on dope isolate. I had this friend in California that would take people on his boat, get them really fucking high on mushrooms like for 3 days to get them off dope
Yeah.
and meth and oxycontin. And this was like a decade ago, and I thought it was crazy at first. I didn't really believe. I was like, no, you just dosed them to the point where they're not the same person, until one of my friends, who I had lost her to addiction and all the issues that come with that. And I didn't really believe it at first, but here we are almost a decade later, and she's still sober. Like, she's the little hippie mama now, and she's definitely not who she was. And a big part of that was definitely therapy too. Like, she got plugged into resources and a community that normalizes that life's hard and that you carry these things with you. And I tell people I'm in recovery. I drink occasionally, but there has been a time in my life where drinking was not good for me. For me, recovery is an abstinence. It's understanding that you have these things that you struggle with and knowing where you are in relation to that, and then setting yourself up for success. And in getting away from the socially accepted drinking, and in Portland, it's everywhere. You can drink from dawn to dusk. You just can't buy any alcohol after like 1 a.m. But dawn to dusk, and no one would blink an eye at it. Like, oh, that's just normal. But you start talking about like grinding up mushrooms and putting them in capsules and microdosing, or having a little bit of tea and like going to work in the tech world, and you're so productive. You built all these databases, your clients' projects are on track and everything, and people start looking at you a little funny. I mean, maybe not in Portland, but in other places for sure. So I just, everybody's addicted to something. They are, whether it's TV, running is an addiction. Exercise, all that, food. I don't knock people who deal with things. I just think that we can do more if we aren't afraid of like researching and finding out what these things really can do for people. But then you go into the whole thing of, why would the medical community fix people, right? Like, there's no money in that.
Absolutely. Speaking of weed, back into an area I'm more familiar with. Did you get high the first time you smoked weed?
No, I remember looking in the mirror going, I was in what grade was I? I was like in 4th or 5th grade. I had older brothers, and they had friends, and I was at one of their friends' houses, and we smoked because me and my girlfriend walked into the room, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you're home from school," and they're all like in a corner, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Oh, hitting a bong or whatever," and they're like, "Okay, but you just inhale it." And first I was trying to like do like cigarettes, like, and that was like, they're like, "No, you got to do it this way." And I took a big rip, and I was just waiting for something to happen. And I, like, that whole day I was like looking at myself like, am I high? Is this like pulling down my, like, am I high? And no, I didn't get high the first time. I did have I got high moment when I came to California, and my boyfriend at the time, his dad brought some great Mendocino blueberry from a Medi Club in Napa Valley. Crystally, so beautiful, so delicious. We smoked one bowl of that between like 5 people, and I was ripped. And I can't even tell you what the THC content was. Maybe 17%, if even that. a decade ago, but that stuff floored me. Like, bam, gone. I had never been so high in my life. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I did.
Would you say, in regards to weed, is that the highest you've ever been, or was there an instance that you were even more so?
um, with weed, like, I think, oh my God, there's just been so many strains. When DJ Shorts was producing Cheese, we got some of the earliest little plant babies on that clones, and that harvest was definitely like I wasn't building up a tolerance, or I definitely wasn't smoking more than usual, but I was smoking morning to sunset, all that. When we started making moon rocks, I think is what everybody calls them now. But we were, producing and everything, and then we just like roll our stuff and we'd make our own moon rocks. That shit really got me stoned. And then the same thing when we were making oil before all these better like cold press methods and extraction things have just changed over the years. But producing honey oil back in the day, that stuff, like the further concentrations, I've had moments where I felt like I was definitely drunk, or maybe somebody dropped something in my drink, or even like to the point I've had some strains get me to where I'm visualizing with the trails, and I just feel like, did somebody put opium in this? Like, what's going on? I am too high and out of body ethereal. But now there's just so much out there that if I don't cycle and take breaks, I don't really, it's just like I'm smoking a cigarette. I'm just smoking for the habit of smoking. I'm not really
Mhm.
getting the benefit. So I cycle my weed. I don't really smoke unless I'm out on tour, and I've made it more of like a social thing for me because I have joints at home. If I want to smoke, I'll roll one up, but
Mm.
I don't really that much anymore, which is also kind of nice. I never thought I'd be at that point in my life, but I
Yeah,
also cycle my caffeine. I go off it like every 2 weeks. And it helps, man. Like, I don't have to go buy ounces all the time anymore.
absolutely. Do you have any go-to strains, or is it just like a thing with like there's just so much variety now that you're just always on something different?
I love pine bits. I really do. I love the little like the smell of it, the taste of it. Bruce Banner is always a great one for me.
Mm.
Um, Gorilla Glue, number 4, I think is the one. And a lot of what I smoke is in the sativa range.
Yeah.
But if I really want, like, if somebody has like some sour diesel, New York diesel, I'll definitely pick that up just for nostalgia. But like Blue Magoo, Blue Dream, anything in that like sativa, that stuff. And if I'm not really familiar with the strains, because they're all over the place now, I just ask somebody for like, what's the piney, fresh smelling, fruity tastes? I'm not a big fan of like the CBD, smoking it. I would rather eat my CBD or my indicas to get the benefits for like aid, pain, relaxation, and all that. Um, I'm also really glad that like it's not like how we used to make butter. Like, I don't get stomach aches when I eat edibles now, and they can fucking like make you pass out, like really make you pass out. It's fantastic. So hooray that we're finally here.
Absolutely. So before I let you go, babe, where's some of the other places online that people can find you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So check out my Twitter, The Babe West, my Instagram, The Babe West. And then I'm babewestxxx.com. You can find my free site there. And any other places I'll have at thebabewest.com. We have some new sites coming up later this year that are going to be a lot of fun. And it won't just be me. It'll be everybody else that comes and does my crazy stuff with me.
Awesome. Babe, thanks for taking the time to come on the show. It was a great discussion. And if you have anything else to talk about or promote or want to come back on the show anytime, just let us know.
Oh, I appreciate it. We'll have to do bong hits for Jesus next time
Absolutely. I'm
when
always
I'm home. So You have a good one, and thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.